My mother-in-law slapped the divorce papers onto the kitchen table so hard the coffee cups jumped. "Sign these," she hissed, her face twisted with disgust. "We know what you did." I stared at the papers, then at my husband Blake, who stood in the doorway with his arms crossed, refusing to meet my eyes. "What I did," I repeated, my voice shaking. "Blake, what is she talking about?" His mother answered for him. "Don't play innocent. We have proof you've been stealing from this family. You're a liar and a thief, and you're leaving this house today." I had 30 minutes to pack my life into 2 bags while they watched like prison guards. What they didn't know was that their lies would destroy them faster than they'd destroyed me. If you're watching this video, please subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story from. Maybe you are living next city to me. I want to know how far it has traveled. Let me take you back to the beginning. I met Blake 4 years ago at a bookstore in Denver. He was charming, kind, and seemed different from the men I'd dated before. We bonded over coffee and classic novels, and within 6 months he proposed. I said yes, ignoring the small red flag that his mother Patricia attended our dates more often than seemed normal. "She's just excited," Blake would say. "She likes you." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. The wedding was beautiful, but Patricia controlled every detail. The flowers, the venue, the guest list, even my dress. "I have better taste," she'd said when I showed her my choice. "Trust me." I let her take over because I thought it meant she accepted me. Blake's father had passed away years ago, and Patricia treated Blake like he was still a child who needed her guidance. I thought marriage would change that. I thought Blake and I would build our own life. Instead, we moved into the house next door to hers. "Just temporarily," Blake promised. That was 3.5 years ago. Living next to Patricia meant she had a key to our house. She'd walk in unannounced, rearrange my kitchen, criticize my cooking, and make comments about how I wasn't good enough for her son. "Blake deserves someone who knows how to keep a proper home," she'd say, running her finger along the counter looking for dust. I worked full-time as a nurse, pulling 12-hour shifts, and still came home to her judgment. Blake never defended me. He'd just shrug and say, "That's how she is. Don't take it personally." But how else was I supposed to take it? 2 months before everything exploded, Patricia started acting stranger than usual. She'd show up when Blake wasn't home, asking pointed questions about our finances. "How much do you make? What do you do with your paychecks? Does Blake give you access to his accounts?" I found it invasive, but answered politely because I was raised to respect my elders. Then she started going through our mail. I caught her once, standing in our entryway with an envelope addressed to Blake. "Just checking if this was important," she said casually, as if it wasn't a federal crime. Things escalated when money started disappearing from Blake's account. Small amounts at first, 50 here, 100 there, then larger sums. Blake noticed and immediately blamed me. "Did you take money out?" he asked one evening, his tone accusing. I was stunned. "No, I have my own account. Why would I touch yours?" He showed me his bank statement. Over 3 months, nearly $5,000 had been withdrawn in cash from ATMs across town. "If it wasn't you," he said slowly, "then who?" I didn't have an answer, but I knew it wasn't me. I suggested checking the security footage from the ATMs, but Blake waved me off. "That's too much trouble. Just be honest. Did you need money for something?" His distrust cut deeper than any insult Patricia had thrown at me. I'd been his wife for 3 years, and he believed I was capable of stealing from him without question. That night, I lay awake wondering when our marriage had become so fragile. When had I become the enemy in my own home? And why was Patricia asking so many questions about money right before it started disappearing? The final accusation came on a Tuesday morning. I just finished a night shift and walked into our house to find Patricia, Blake, and Blake's Aunt Maureen sitting in the living room like a tribunal. "Sit down," Patricia commanded. I was too tired to argue. Blake pulled out a folder and slid it across the coffee table. Inside were printed bank statements, highlighted transactions, and a handwritten note I'd supposedly written confessing to taking the money. Except I'd never written any note. "This is insane," I said, staring at the forged handwriting. "I didn't write this." "Stop lying," Patricia shouted, standing up. "We found this in your drawer. You've been stealing from my son to fund your shopping addiction." Shopping addiction? I bought scrubs and groceries. I drove a 10-year-old car and hadn't bought new clothes in months. "Blake," I turned to my husband, desperate for him to see reason. "You know me, you know I wouldn't do this." But he just sat there, jaw clenched, looking at me like I was a stranger. "The evidence is right here," he said quietly. Just admit it, and we can figure out what to do next. I refused to admit to something I didn't do. That's when Patricia dropped the divorce papers on the table and told me I had 30 minutes to pack. "If you leave quietly," she said, her voice cold and sharp, "we won't press charges, but if you fight this, we'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." I looked at Blake one last time, waiting for him to defend me, to question his mother's story, to remember who I was, but he said nothing. So I stood up, walked to our bedroom, and packed my life into 2 duffel bags while they watched from the hallway like I was a criminal. I moved into a friend's apartment that night. Carla, a fellow nurse, didn't ask many questions. She just made up the couch and handed me a blanket. "You can stay as long as you need," she said. I couldn't cry. I was too numb, too shocked by how quickly my life had unraveled. The next morning, I called a lawyer. His name was Vincent, and he'd handled a friend's divorce a year earlier. "Don't sign anything," he said immediately, "and get me copies of everything they showed you. If you've been framed, we'll prove it." Over the next week, I lived in a fog. I went to work, came home, and sat on Carla's couch replaying every moment of my marriage, looking for clues I'd missed. How had I been so blind? Then Vincent called with news that made my blood run cold. "I pulled Blake's financial records with your authorization as a spouse. The ATM withdrawals, they were made in locations near Patricia's house, and the timestamps match when you were at work." My hands started shaking. "So she took the money and blamed me." Vincent's voice was grim. "That's exactly what happened." But it got worse. Vincent dug deeper and found that Patricia had been forging my signature on checks from a joint account Blake had set up when we got married, an account I didn't even know existed. She drained nearly $15,000 over 2 years, writing checks to herself and signing my name. "This is fraud," Vincent said. "Real, prosecutable fraud, and she framed you to cover her tracks." I felt sick. This woman had smiled at me, hugged me at Christmas, and all the while she'd been systematically stealing from her own son and blaming me for it. Vincent filed a motion to delay the divorce proceedings and demanded a full financial investigation. Blake's lawyer tried to fight it, but the judge agreed. "If there are allegations of fraud, we need clarity before dissolving this marriage," the judge said. Blake looked stunned, sitting across the courtroom from me. Patricia sat beside him, her face pale. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She knew the truth was coming. And when it did, her entire world would collapse. I felt no satisfaction. Only exhaustion. The investigation took 6 weeks. During that time, Patricia tried to contact me twice, once through a mutual friend asking if we could talk things over privately. I refused. The second time, she showed up at the hospital where I worked, waiting by my car. "Please," she said, her voice desperate. "Let's settle this without involving the courts. I'll admit I made a mistake. We can fix this." I looked at her, this woman who'd called me a thief, who'd convinced her son to throw me away like garbage. "You didn't make a mistake," I said calmly. "You committed fraud, and you'll face the consequences." The forensic accountant presented his findings in court. Patricia had stolen over $18,000 from Blake's accounts, forged my signature repeatedly, and falsified the confession note by copying my handwriting from birthday cards. The ATM footage confirmed she'd made all the withdrawals herself. Blake sat in the courtroom, his face white as paper, staring at his mother like he didn't recognize her. "Why?" he whispered. She didn't answer. She just cried, insisting she'd needed the money for expenses, that she'd planned to pay it back, that she never meant for things to go this far. Judge was not sympathetic. Patricia was charged with forgery, theft, and fraud. She faced up to 5 years in prison. Blake's Aunt Maureen, who'd sat in judgment of me that awful Tuesday, apologized tearfully in the hallway. "I'm so sorry. She told us you'd confessed. We believed her." I nodded but didn't accept the apology. Belief without question, condemnation without investigation, those were choices they'd made. And I'd been the one who paid for them. Blake approached me as I was leaving the courthouse. "Can we talk?" he asked. I looked at him for a long moment. "No," I said, "we can't." The divorce was finalized 2 months later. I didn't ask for anything beyond what was legally mine. I didn't want his money or his house or his guilt. I just wanted my name cleared and my life back. The settlement included compensation for the stolen funds and emotional damages. Blake had to sell the house next to Patricia's to pay it. I heard through mutual friends that he moved to another state, unable to face the neighborhood that now knew his mother's crimes. Patricia took a plea deal and served 18 months. losing her reputation and her relationship with Blake in the process. I wish I could say I felt victorious, but mostly I felt tired. Tired of fighting, tired of proving my innocence, tired of untangling the mess someone else had made. Carla convinced me to take a week off work, so I drove to the mountains and stayed in a cabin with no phone service. I hiked, read books, and slowly started feeling like myself again. Not the person I'd been before Blake, but someone new. Someone stronger, more careful, less willing to shrink herself to fit into spaces that were never meant for her. When I returned, I made changes. I switched to a different hospital across town, where no one knew my story. I moved into my own apartment, small but mine, with a door only I had keys to. I started therapy, working through the betrayal and the self-doubt that came with being falsely accused. My therapist said something that stuck with me. You survived being convicted without trial by the people who were supposed to love you most. That's not weakness. That's remarkable strength. I started believing her after a while. A year after the divorce, Blake reached out via email. He'd been in therapy too, he said. He understood now how deeply he'd failed me. How his mother's manipulation had poisoned our marriage long before the accusations. He asked if I could ever forgive him. I read the email 3 times before responding. My answer was simple. I forgive you for my own peace, not because you've earned it, but forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. I hope you build a better life, just not with me in it. I hit send and felt a weight lift that I didn't know I'd been carrying. People ask me sometimes if I regret marrying Blake. The honest answer is no. Not because the marriage was good, but because it taught me things I needed to learn. That love without trust is just words. That family can be your greatest support or your deepest wound. That standing up for yourself, even when everyone calls you a liar, is the bravest thing you can do. I became someone I'm proud of through that fire. And no one can take that from me, not even the people who tried to destroy me. 2 years after everything fell apart, I met someone new. His name was Xavier, and he was a teacher at the community center where I'd started volunteering. He was kind, patient, and most importantly, he had healthy boundaries with his family. We took things slow, building trust brick by brick. When I finally told him my story, he listened without judgment. You deserved better, he said simply, and I'll spend every day proving not everyone is like them. I believed him. Not blindly, but carefully, and that made all the difference. I ran into Blake's Aunt Maureen at a coffee shop last spring. She was older, grayer, carrying guilt in the lines around her eyes. I think about you often, she said quietly. I'm ashamed of what we did. I nodded. I appreciate you saying that. She hesitated. Patricia got out last year. She's different now, broken, and Blake, he's never been the same. I felt a flicker of something, not quite pity, but understanding. We'd all been damaged by Patricia's choices. Some of us had just chosen different ways to heal. I hope you all find peace, I said, and I meant it. Today, I'm living a life I built from scratch. I'm engaged to Xavier. And we're planning a small wedding with people who actually love us. I bought a house in a neighborhood where no one has keys but me. I still work as a nurse, still help people through their worst days, and somehow that work feels more meaningful now. Because I know what it's like to be helpless, accused, and abandoned. They kicked me out over lies, and yes, my divorce turned their world upside down. But it also turned mine right side up. And in the end, I didn't just survive their betrayal. I became stronger because of it. That's a victory they can never take away. The story you have just heard is a powerful real-life story that happens in families everywhere, one I have witnessed through the experiences of others. I'm telling you to wake your minds to truth, justice, and how we should never condemn someone without evidence, especially those we claim to love. If you were in my position, would you have fought to clear your name or walked away quietly? Would you have forgiven Blake or kept the door closed forever? I want to know your opinion because every story is like a candle that can light the path for someone else. God bless you, and may truth always find its way to the surface. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I am leaving you with one of the most beloved channels, King's Revenge Vault. I am sure none of my stories will fail to move you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.